The mid-morning light spilled into the top floor of Reid Industries, painting the office in golden glass. Alexander Reid sat behind his obsidian desk, his attention buried in a stack of contracts worth millions. Everything in his world was calculated: numbers, schedules, people. Especially people. His phone vibrated. Unknown number, he muttered, irritation flickering in his voice. Calls that weren't on his calendar didn't exist in his world. Still, something, a gut instinct, maybe, made him answer. Mr. Reid. A woman's voice came through, brisk but edged with concern. Yes. Who is this? This is Dr. Morgan from St. Luke's Hospital. We have a patient listed as Lena Hart. You're marked as her only emergency contact. The pen slipped from his hand. Lena Hart, his former executive assistant, smart, relentless, and brave enough to challenge him, until 3 weeks ago, when she'd walked out after one of their worst arguments. She had told him she couldn't work for a man who didn't see people, only productivity. He'd told her she was replaceable. Now, she was in a hospital bed, and somehow, he was the only one the hospital could call. What happened to her? He asked, his voice low but trembling slightly. She was struck by a vehicle downtown. She's stable but in shock. We need someone to authorize her treatment immediately. I'll be there in 15 minutes, he said, already standing. The ride to St. Luke's blurred into sirens and city lights. Alexander's driver tried to make conversation, but he heard nothing. His thoughts replayed moments he'd buried, Lena laughing at his dry humor, bringing him black coffee before meetings, staying late without complaint. He remembered her last day, the look in her eyes, the words he'd thrown like daggers: "You're too emotional for this job, Miss Hart." And now she might never hear him say "I'm sorry." When he arrived, the smell of antiseptic and echo of hurried footsteps filled the air. "I'm here for Lena Hart," he told the nurse at the front desk. The woman looked up from her screen. "Room 312, sir. Please sign these forms." He scrawled his signature without reading, the ink trembling under his fingers. The elevator ride felt eternal. When the doors opened, he saw her through the glass window, pale, still, an IV line running down her arm. For the first time in years, Alexander Reid didn't feel powerful. He felt human. He stepped inside the room. Machines beeped softly. Her chest rose and fell in steady rhythm. Her hair, usually tied neatly for work, spilled across the pillow, and a bruise colored the edge of her jaw. He sat down beside her, his voice breaking the sterile quiet. "Lena." Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then finding him. "Mr. Reid," he exhaled. "It's me. You're going to be fine." A faint, tired smile touched her lips. "Didn't think you'd come. You listed me as your emergency contact," he said softly. "Why?" Her brow furrowed. "Did I? I don't remember. Maybe because I didn't have anyone else." That hit him harder than he expected. He'd always assumed someone like her, warm, capable, kind, had a family, a circle, a life outside work. But now he realized how little he had ever asked. He leaned forward. "You should have called me. Or someone. Anyone." She gave a weak laugh. "You're the last person I thought would care." His throat tightened. "I didn't care enough before. That was my mistake." The doctor entered, checking charts and monitors. "She's lucky. Drive," Morgan said. "A mild concussion and a fractured arm. But she's dehydrated and exhausted. I'd guess she's been under a lot of stress." Alexander's gaze dropped. He knew exactly why. After the doctor left, silence filled the room again. He reached out, hesitated, then gently took her uninjured hand. She didn't pull away. "I should have been better to you," he admitted. "You worked harder than anyone I've ever hired." She turned her head, her eyes glassy. "You were just doing your job. I was the one who took it personally." "No," he said firmly. "I was cruel because you made me feel something I didn't want to feel." She blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" He swallowed, the truth trembling at his lips. "You challenged me. You made me question everything, the way I led, the way I live. And instead of listening, I pushed you away." Lena's voice was barely above a whisper. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I thought I lost my chance to." Hours passed. The sky outside turned from silver to dusk. Alexander stayed by her side, answering calls through clenched teeth, delegating meetings, ignoring the world beyond that room. When the nurse came to check on her again, she smiled at him. "You can go home, Mr. Reid. We'll take care of her tonight." "I'll stay," he said without hesitation. The nurse nodded knowingly and left. Lena shifted slightly. You don't have to. I know. He leaned back, exhaustion creeping in. But I want to. For a while, neither spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the heart monitor and the rhythm of their breathing, oddly in sync. Finally, she broke the silence. When I left, I thought you'd be glad to see me go. He smiled faintly. I thought so too. Her eyes met his, steady now. And what about now? He looked at her, really looked, and something inside him finally softened. Now, I can't imagine walking into that office without you there. She let out a shaky breath, tears slipping down her cheeks. I didn't think I mattered to you. You did, he said, his voice quiet but sure. You still do. When dawn crept through the window, Alexander was still sitting beside her, jacket draped over his shoulders, her chart open on his lap. Lena stirred, blinking awake to find him there. You stayed, she murmured. He smiled, a small, genuine thing that felt foreign on his face. Get used to it. She laughed softly, wincing a little. That sounded suspiciously like a promise. Maybe it is. He reached for her hand again, holding it this time without hesitation. For years, Alexander Reid had built his empire on control, of people, of outcomes, of emotions. But in that quiet hospital room, beside the woman who'd once walked away from him, he realized something he never had before. Control meant nothing when it came to the people who truly mattered. And Lena Hart, the woman who had defied him, challenged him, and somehow still listed him as her only contact, mattered more than all his billions ever could. The skyline of Manhattan shimmered like a blade under the morning sun, slicing through the haze that lingered after dawn. On the 47th floor of Reid Industries, Alexander Reid, billionaire CEO and reputed perfectionist, sat behind a sleek desk that looked as cold as the man himself. The hum of the city was far below him, a sound he hadn't really heard in years. He liked control. He lived for structure, precision, and results. Feelings were distractions, and distractions were weaknesses. Which was why his ex-assistant, Lena Hart, had driven him insane. She'd been brilliant, sharp as a scalpel, unafraid to speak her mind, and far too kind for the ruthless pace of his empire. She had been the only person in his building who dared tell him when he was wrong. And 3 weeks ago, she'd quit, after an argument that still echoed in his mind. Greater than, you treat people like machines, Mr. Reid, she'd said, eyes glistening. And you treat this company like a charity, he'd snapped back. Maybe that's why. You'll always have money, but never anyone who cares about you. She'd walked out, and he'd told himself it didn't matter. But the silence she left behind had been louder than her presence. His phone buzzed. He frowned. Unknown number. Reid, he answered. Mr. Reid, a woman's voice said on the other end, urgent but calm. This is Dr. Morgan from St. Luke's Hospital. Are you the emergency contact for a Ms. Lena Hart? His pen fell from his hand. What did you say? She was brought in after a car accident, the doctor continued. She's stable, but we need immediate authorization for a procedure. You're the only person listed under emergency contacts. Alexander's throat went dry. He hadn't spoken to her since the day she quit. Why on earth would she list him, of all people? He didn't ask. He didn't need to. I'll be there in 15 minutes, he said, already grabbing his coat. The city blurred outside the tinted windows of his black Maybach. His driver, Victor, glanced at him through the mirror. Everything all right, sir? No, Alexander said shortly. Drive faster. He tried not to think, but memories flooded in, the way Lena's laughter used to spill into late nights at the office, the gentle way she'd remind him to eat when he forgot, the spark in her eyes when she challenged his decisions. And the look of hurt the day he said the words, "You're replaceable." Now, all he could think was, what if I was wrong? When he reached Street Luke's, the antiseptic air hit him like a wall. I'm here for Lena Hart, he told the nurse at the front desk, his voice sharper than intended. The nurse's eyes widened at the sight of the billionaire standing before her, perfectly dressed but visibly shaken. She's in room 312, sir. You'll need to sign these consent forms before treatment. He didn't hesitate. He signed every line without reading a word. When he entered room 312, the sound of the heart monitor filled the air, steady, rhythmic, fragile. Lena lay motionless on the bed, a small bandage across her forehead, her arm in a cast, a faint bruise along her jawline. For a moment, Alexander couldn't move. His chest felt tight, as if someone had stolen the oxygen from the room. He took a slow step closer and whispered, Lena. Her eyelashes fluttered, and her eyes opened, unfocused at first, then slowly finding him. Mr. Reid, she murmured, her voice weak. He let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. It's me. You're safe now. She gave a faint, pained smile. Didn't think you'd come. He sat beside her, his jaw tightening. They called me. You put my name down as your emergency contact. Her brows knitted slightly. Did I? I don't remember doing that. He looked away, guilt flickering behind his stoic expression. Why would you? I was. He stopped himself. Never mind. Lena's voice was barely a whisper. Maybe because there wasn't anyone else. That single sentence hit harder than any deal gone wrong. He turned to her, eyes softening. No family. She shook her head weakly. Not anymore. The doctor entered a moment later, flipping through her chart. She'll need to stay a few days for observation, drive. Morgan said. A mild concussion and a fractured wrist, but she's very lucky. The driver ran a red light. Alexander clenched his fists. Did they catch him? Yes. The police have his information. He nodded, his tone dropping low. Good. I'll take care of it. When the doctor left, Lena glanced at him with tired amusement. Still bossing everyone around, huh? A small smile ghosted his lips. Someone has to make sure things get done. Her eyes closed for a moment. You always were like that. All control, no emotion. He sighed, his voice softening. Maybe I just didn't know how to show it. She didn't answer, but she didn't let go of his gaze either. Hours passed. The city outside turned to evening, shadows pooling around the edges of the hospital window. Alexander hadn't left her side once. When a nurse offered to bring him coffee, he refused. He didn't want to miss it. Her breathing, her voice, her heartbeat. He had everything money could buy. Jets, skyscrapers, power, but right now, he would have traded it all just to see her smile again. Finally, Lena stirred, eyes flickering open again. You should go home, she murmured. I'm not leaving you here alone, he said firmly. You don't have to. I want to, he interrupted. She blinked at him, surprised. You never do anything you don't have to. He smirked faintly. Guess I'm learning. A small silence fell between them, soft, warm, unfamiliar. Why do you care so much now? She asked finally, voice fragile but curious. He looked down, fingers tightening around hers. Because I spent 3 weeks pretending I didn't. She stared at him, eyes glimmering with something unreadable. Then she whispered, don't pretend anymore. When dawn broke, the light spilled across her face, golden and gentle. Alexander was still there, his coat draped over her blanket, head tilted back against the chair. He hadn't slept. Lena's lips curved faintly. You stayed. He opened his eyes, meeting hers. Get used to it. And for the first time in years, Alexander Reid, the man who ruled boardrooms and broke empires, smiled not like a billionaire, but like a man who'd finally found something he didn't want to lose.